Hello and happy Christmas. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm here to look ahead to Newcastle United's Boxing Day match against Nottingham Forest. It's currently Christmas Eve. This is the last thing I'm going to do before I'm going to take a little bit of a break and spend some time with my family for Christmas. But thought I'd just come on and just do a little video to look ahead to that game, which has become a must-win for Newcastle, obviously, after that disappointing performance at Kenilworth Road yesterday. 1-0 defeat, very, very poor performance, probably the worst performance I think all told, because it didn't to me have much to do with fatigue. I think yes, you can factor in the injuries as a natural reason, as I've said for weeks, but I thought Newcastle were off the pace. Everything minimal that you need to win a Premier League game just wasn't there, and Luton were fantastic. They played at a pace that Newcastle couldn't match, but they're becoming increasingly easy to face away from home, and just you take the lead early, you sit back and deep, you funnel them out wide, and you basically sit and hope and manage them. And that's kind of, Newcastle don't have an answer to that, and I think that's becoming a increasingly difficult problem to cover. But I'm going to do a video, as I said, in the week after Christmas to look ahead to January, give my thoughts on where Newcastle are, and a little bit of information on what might happen in the window and what might happen with Dan Ashworth and where the board is currently at with everything. Ahead to Nottingham Forest, I think it's a really good fixture for Newcastle to get themselves back on track. I think I did a podcast with the True Faith guys this morning. The funny thing you can say about Newcastle at the moment is that they are two different teams, like playing at home and away. It's very difficult to judge them with regards Boxing Day on what you saw yesterday, because you can guarantee that they'll play a different type of game. They'll control it more. They'll be more proactive rather than reactive. They'll be a lot more energetic, a lot more intense. That, you know, even despite the injuries, that's what we've seen from Newcastle for weeks at St James's Park. And I think there's no real reason to believe that will change. I think Nottingham Forest come into that game obviously off the back of a huge change in manager. Steve Cooper was sacked and replaced by Nuno Espirito Santo last week, and I wrote a piece on this for Colossus Bets in my column. I did 2 columns this week to save me from doing one next week. One on David Moyes and the first one on Steve Cooper. And I looked at his relationship with the Forest fans, and there's a lot of comparisons you can make with Leeds and Marcel Bielsa. But the one I would like to, and I made it on the podcast this morning, I would compare it to is Chris Hughton in Newcastle. And the irony is that he replaced Chris Hughton at Nottingham Forest, where they looked like they were only heading down to League One at the start of 2 seasons ago. Cooper comes in and takes them up for the first time in I think 24 years, stabilises them in the Premier League, and this season I don't think they go down. So I can understand why there's a sort of element of people saying that it's a harsh decision, but when you work for somebody like Evangelos Marinakis and the way that he works and the way that the volatility of his personality, you know, the way the influence that Jorge Mendes has now had on Nottingham Forest and Olympiacos, his other venture, the number of players that have been brought in, the money spent there as well, it's very difficult to sort of see how somebody with Steve Cooper's personality, very placid, very good person, very good coach, but not really a sort of big personality manager. It sort of feels like that's what Nottingham Forest want and need. I'm not necessarily sure that Nuno is that either, but I think Cooper just stops fitting there in that sense. But I also believe that if Forest wanted to become a team like Brentford, like Brighton, in one of these sort of stabilising themselves in the Premier League for years to come, they need somebody with the nous and the tactical understanding and the man management skills of Cooper, because I think everybody loved him. And even though there were difficult spells last season where it looked like he was going to be sacked, and this season, I think it's a very harsh decision to let him go. I don't think Cooper being on the or Nuno being on the sidelines really makes a difference for Newcastle. I think they know what their job is. The pressure's on to win this game, because obviously off the back of that defeat to Luton, but also the fixtures coming up. You've got Liverpool on New Year's Day at Anfield next. That looks like a very, very tough game, given Newcastle have only won once away from home. Liverpool are unbeaten at Anfield, and you know, we've all seen Newcastle teams that have been better than Liverpool probably on paper, including last season in August when they started the season quite well. Alexander Isak made his debut, I believe, scored a goal, should have scored a second one. It was cancelled for offside, and then there was a late goal from Fabio Carvalho that sort of cancelled that out, and that's a really painful experience for Newcastle. But they were a better team than Liverpool at that point, and they had still lost. So it's very difficult to imagine this wounded animal that is Newcastle going to Liverpool, who have looked more or less like they're back to their best for most of this season, and expecting them to get a result. So that really puts pressure on this game, and that's even not factoring the Sunderland game, Manchester City, and then Aston Villa. After that, some really tough fixtures coming up. So huge to win this game if they can at St James's on Boxing Day against a Forest team that's only won once away from home this season, albeit at Chelsea. They were last at St James's Park on the opening day of last season when all of this sort of was just kicking off. There was a lot of hope. There was a lot of fresh ideas, fresh sort of feel to Newcastle. On Sven Botman and Nick Pope's debut, Isak was just about to come in. Bruno's first full season, Trippier's first full season, Eddie Howe's first full season. It really felt like there was that was the start of a journey. Now it sort of feels like it's a crucial point in the journey where there is external pressure that's ramping up again on Eddie Howe. I'll go into that more next week, as I say. And if you do have any more questions for me, do drop them down in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to answer them, or tweet me at Harry DeCosmo, as I've said. I know Newcastle have been fantastic in Imperius at home, only the second best home record in the league this season but it's that away record that is putting pressure on the home games. There's no room for error in this game because of how poor they've been away from home against teams you would expect them on paper to beat, like Everton, Bournemouth, Wolves, and now Luton. And against what's coming up in the next few weeks, and if the results go south, then Newcastle could be well out of the Champions League race and battling to be in the top half and battling for that sort of 7th Europa Conference League position, which actually isn't guaranteed because only Liverpool, who are in the League Cup semi-finals, look like they're going to finish in the top 6. So they would need to win it for that Conference League position to drop down. If they don't, then Chelsea, Middlesbrough, or Fulham are looking at it, and then Newcastle will not have European football if they finish 7th. Newcastle will be in a good position going into January if they can win in this game. There's obviously need for reinforcements. I think that's pretty obvious, and whether they'll get them, we'll see. But to me, I think this is a really crucial game, and I think it'll be won in the same way that most games are at Newcastle. I think, as I've mentioned on the podcast this morning, I've mentioned in previous videos, I think what's really impressive about Newcastle is that they don't tend to need to overrun teams anymore. There have been loads of games last season where they didn't overrun them, and they did, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and Leeds come to mind, where they struggled to break teams down, whereas now they seem to be really good at managing games and dictating games, and not necessarily at 100 miles an hour, not necessarily in the first 20 minutes. I think that's a really positive thing. So it could be a game for patience against a poor Nottingham Forest team that are still going to take their time to find their feet under Nuno, I think. So there's a real opportunity for Newcastle to bounce back, but there's, for the first time, I think, real pressure on these home games because the away form it's taken a new dive, I think, with that Luton result. It was a really poor performance. There was nothing about them that was right, and there's start to be questions asked: why can't they do what they do at home away from home, and do they even aim to do that? And what do they have to in an answer when they can't dictate the pace of the game from the very start? Because Luton did that yesterday, Everton did that at Goodison Park, and Tottenham obviously did that at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. All three pretty damning defeats. So it's a lot of pressure on Newcastle going into this game, but I'm confident they'll get the victory. Please continue to like, share and subscribe. I'll be back in a couple of days with this video to look back at the Forest game, but also to answer some wider questions about January and the club as a whole. Please do put some comments in the box below, or tweet me, as I said. Continue to like, share and subscribe if this is what you like. Happy Christmas, and I'll see you next time.